Hey everyone, we're just going to quickly go through a couple of things by setting up arrays and putting those arrays into table views for our iOS apps. So I'm going to start off with an iOS application. From here on, I'm just going to give it a name, something like array, table view. Nice and simple, we know exactly what we're making here. Make sure that we have our interface as a storyboard and our language as Swift. So we can go ahead and create these here as so. Perfect. So we're going to start off with our storyboard. Within our storyboard, we're simply going to go and click on our plus here. And we're going to start off with a table view. Drag this in like so. Once we've dragged this in, we need to ensure that we are able to click on our inspector at the top and simply change our dynamic prototypes here to make sure that we only have one prototype cell. Once we have our one prototype cell, we need to ensure that we click on this at the bottom here to go ahead and show our document outline. Once we've done so, we can click on this here for our table view cell, and we need to have our identifier over here, in which we're just going to call cell and then push enter. You know it's saved and done what if over here in your document outline you can see it's named cell under table view. So now with those, we are going to get stuck within our code. I'm going to move these to make it a little bit easier to see. Open up a new window, and I'm going to open up a view controller. So with our view controller here, we need a few things to make sure we can have everything set up. Firstly, we need to add a few things within our class to initialize it. So I'm going to add the following code: UI table view delegate. Also making sure that after every single one of these items that we have a comma afterwards. And then I'm also going to add UI table view data source. Once we click away, it will come up with this red error message here. If you click on the error message, you can go ahead and click on fix here, and that will simply go ahead and create some functions needed within our code. One other thing that we will need to do is we'll need to link our table view. So I'm going to hold down Control and drag this over. I'm going to make this an outlet, and for now I'm just going to call it TBL names list. I'm going to make a quick comment here and just say there's going to be an output. So at this point here, within our code, we will have this table view code that is going to ask for the number of rows we need within the section, and it's going to return or want to return an integer. So to be able to do that, we first need to have an array set up. So I'm going to make a note here and say variables and data. I'm going to make an array. I'm going to make it a variable array called names. I'm going to say that is going to be an array of strings by saying here within the square bracket We expect these to be strings. And I'm going to put 2 strings within my array, with Michael as one, a comma in between, and so the next one as John. So with the number of rows here as an integer, we need to say that we want that number of rows to equal to the amount of items within our array. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to make that return names dot count. It's simply going to return an integer saying how many objects are in this array by counting them all. Now within this one here, this code's a little bit more complex. It will be supplied, so we can copy it from this lesson here and it will be supplied for later use. So from here, we're simply going to copy this here, like so, and just format it so everything is lining up well. And one more line we need to do is return cell. So here we're just saying that for our table view, we need to ensure that it's going to return a table view cell. We're going to have our cell. Basically say for the table view with the identifier, we want it to equal to all of the things in our array and then return them. At this point here, we want to return a string for our array's name, which we've called names here. Finally, one last thing we need to do so it brings things back is at this point here in our override function, we need to ensure that we are able to load it when it says it's loaded. So we're going to say tbl names list dot delegate equals self. And finally, tbl names list dot data source equals self. At this point, we can save it, and now we can go ahead and we can run that. So now with it open and with it starting to load up the app after it's installed, we should expect to have our table view with our populated cells. Now with that created, we want to look into how we can append anything to this array. So once we've stopped this, I'm going to go ahead and just do a couple more things here. Firstly, going to go over to our storyboard. I'm going to add a text field here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a button. I'm going to double click on the button and I might just rename that add. Perfect. And then with this one here, back over towards our other pane here for our inspectors, I'm just going to give that a placeholder text and I'll just say enter name. Make that a little bit bigger. At this point here, I'm going to drag this one into our view controller right at the top. I'm going to call this txt name, and I'm just going to give this a little label for inputs so we know exactly where it is there. Now I'm going to finally add this add function. So make some space here. I'm going to give this a little comment saying function adds name from txt name to the names array. I'm going to hold down Control, drag this add button in, make sure that it is an action, and I'm just going to call this btn button add name. From here, I can simply just use our names array dot, and I can use another method here known as append. From append, I'm simply just going to make sure that it appends the text that was entered from txt name. One final thing we have to do is make sure that our table reloads the data whenever that button is pressed. Oh, and make sure that we unwrap that with an exclamation mark. So with this finished now, I'm going to save. I'm going to go ahead and run this. Once that runs, we should be able to append things to our array and have them display within that table view. And now I can go ahead and add the name. I will enter Monica. Click on add, and that will append to the end of our name. There are a few things here you may want to do as well, just to make things a little neater. So we may be able to do some things on the end here, like ensure that our txt name text is blank again. We may also want to do something else like sort them automatically. So we may go names.sort here as well, just to make sure that we're going to have our names sorted in order. Fantastic. I hope that was helpful for everybody. Go ahead and play around with some different data structures. So you may want to look at doing it with an associative array, or you may want to have a look at doing it even with different types of objects within an array, like an integer or a float. All right, and as always, happy coding.